Well, hi. Welcome to the show.
Hi,
I love the moody lighting you
okay?
have.
I was just gonna ask, like, is it okay? Like, I'm
Whatever
so
you're
tired, I
comfortable
don't have all
with.
my lights on.
No, you're good.
Okay.
I mean, like, I'm also tired, and this is a doom basement, basically.
Interesting. I love the complete and utter lack of anything else in the background.
If it
behind
makes you feel better, these are curtains. These aren't even
Okay.
literally
Oh,
like the
okay.
wall. It's, I
Okay,
think, for
word.
sound reduction. Well, one of my really good friends, their name is Laurel, so it's like keep beating really
I
cool
like
flowery
that name
botanist
too.
kind of names.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, welcome. I am glad to have you on the show.
Yes, I'm really happy that you asked me to chat with you. That was like super nice and unexpected. I think you also chatted with my friend Alex, right?
Oh my
Um,
god, everybody knows them. It's great.
yes, that's so true. That's such a just correct statement about like Alex's impact, period.
Yeah, honestly, I really fuck with her attitude and her whole like agenda with what she's been wanting to create for the space in New York.
Yeah, Alex is one of the most unapologetically,
Hmm.
unabashedly, like, I don't know, just themselves people that I
Yeah.
have ever had the pleasure of knowing. And it's made me feel more like safe to be unapologetically and unabashedly myself, but also like it makes me feel so. Alex is also just like a really amazing friend. So to be loved by someone who is so like purposeful and like straightforward in like every single thing that they do, like
Yeah.
it's a really good feeling.
Well, it's good to know that there's like representation and a good, powerful voice
Yes.
creating a good community with a lot of the people that I keep bringing on the show. So I keep seemingly like finding my way in this circle that everybody's creating over on the East Coast. And I'm like,
Oh yeah, where are you located? Where are you based out of?
Ohio.
Oh, okay. I've been to Ohio once recently. We drove through it on our way to and from Louisville for like Coffee Fest.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, yeah, and we stopped in Columbus. We went to the Parable.
Wow. I'm
Hmm.
literally based in Columbus, so that's funny.
Have you
You could have met
been to
me
the
at one point in
Parable? That,
time.
yeah.
Yeah.
I would I would
That's good.
recommend everybody go there. And I that's the only thing I know about Columbus or Ohio. We literally just only stopped in that state to go to a coffee shop. Otherwise, we could have just kept going.
That's interesting. Like, of all the cities, you chose Columbus, or was that just out of convenience?
I really, really, really wanted to go to that coffee shop specifically. That
What's your
person,
connection to Parable?
one of the people who opened up the Parable, Jeffrey Clark, was in my cohort in Glittercat.
Oh,
In
cool.
the Glittercat Digitician, we did the first iteration of it, and we were both in the barista cohort. So everyone who was in the barista cohort, like, I have it's crazy. Everyone's like, I'm still close with, like, I have long lasting close relationships
Mm-hmm.
with. So yeah, that was really special to me. And like, also, if you just even follow like them on social media, like everything they do is crazy and amazing.
Yeah.
So I wanted like a big old like stuffed croissant and like a crazy like amazing miso caramel latte and like
Yeah.
just like just all the goodness.
Well, I'm glad you had a good positive experience driving through.
Yeah,
Um,
Columbus is a thumbs up for me.
I'm glad. But I wanted to bring you on the show because I feel like you have a lot of like stories to tell. I didn't even know you were part of Glitter Cat at one point. So I felt
Yeah.
like I've had we've had another person that was a barista that came on the show too. Firecracker of a personality. I cannot wait for that episode to come out. But like I think it's a rare opportunity for me to have more one-on-one conversations with more of the front of the house people than the back of the house, because that's a lot of what the whole like genre of this podcast started off as. So I was curious on your journey to get to this point of, did you originally want to start in the coffee world? Did you work your way up in a different way to get where you're at now? kind of like explain a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, well, I wear a lot of different hats in the coffee industry, as like a lot of us do. I know. So talking about like how it happened and also what it is also is just like so funny sometimes because, yeah, most of my coffee industry experience is like front of house, is like
Mm-hmm.
service. Um, but now I also have gotten more into in the past few years the competition side of coffee industry, the mentorship side of coffee industry, like the education, like freelancing, um, all of that like fun stuff
Mm-hmm.
that you have like the ability to try out in an industry like this and kind of see where your niche is. But so I got my first barista job when I was 17, so like 10 years ago now, and it was at Starbucks, and it was just, like a job. And unfortunately, it was like kind of a nightmarish experience
Yeah,
because,
you started
Starbucks.
I was gonna say, you and I kind of started around the same time with Starbucks. Were you for the
Hmm.
post Frappuccino War era, like with the unicorn Frappuccino shit?
I was pre.
Same though.
No. I
I
was
was
pre, and then
I
I got
experienced it
fired
too.
shortly thereafter.
Yeah.
Like when they had like, I remember they had those store to store competitions
Yeah.
about like, oh, Frappy Hour, that's what it
Yeah.
was. And like, oh my goodness. Wow, it's all being
The nightmares.
dredged up. Yeah. But so I just had like unfortunate like labor issues, as many people who work with Starbucks seem to experience.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting fired because my availability changed. And so I was trying to get like just the quickest job that I could possibly get. And I was like, okay, what do I have like experience in now? Coffee. So it happened to be like at a specialty coffee shop that I was able to get a job at. And this was when I was 18. I was like in college already. I had just moved out on my own. So I was just, I was looking for a job to have and to, you know, work full time, sort of provide for myself. And I just found that like this whole world of specialty coffee and everything that it takes to kind of like all the things that go into being a knowledgeable specialty coffee professional, or just even like a professional who works in the industry full time, like learning all those niches, I found that I was good at it and that it came sort of naturally to me, and that it also interested me, which I hadn't experienced much in my life before that. I had like a lot of trouble in school growing up, being like undiagnosed with autism and like just not learning like everybody else learned, and kind of nobody having any idea why, or like why I didn't enjoy school, or like why I just couldn't like function in that sort of structure. I spent most of my like teenage and formative years feeling like I would never really be good at anything. Like
Mm-hmm.
success and aptitude just wasn't for me. I was just like a person who like was below average and needed and struggled. But then I realized that, I just hadn't been given the tools that I needed or found anything that, I could relate to well enough or find enough interest in to really be good at. So finding something that I was able to excel in,
Mm-hmm.
especially like being self-taught and still being able to excel, it sort of really opened up my ideas about myself and kind of introduced like self-confidence and professional confidence to me for the first time. And so it definitely became like an immediate special interest, and probably like my longest special interest to date. So yeah, I spent a lot of time being a barista because I have a natural curiosity, and I also like to, like meet people who have the same interests as me, and I feel really like determined to create community. I would go out of my way to go into like New York because I live in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
I always have. But I would, go into the New York specialty coffee scene to try and like make new connections and see what else was out there. And I ended up being like pushed by some of my mentors to like compete in US Barista Champs prelims. And, through that I met different people who like introduced me to different sectors of the industry. So I bounced around in Jersey for a while, looking for a shop that like I felt really comfortable at. And I think it's hard for autistic people to find jobs where they feel like they're set up for success, and to feel like where their personhood is taken into account, as opposed to just being like, some labor machine that can help you take advantage of capitalism or not.
Right.
And that's been probably the biggest struggle in finding like where are the right places for, me to work and for me to thrive in, and that will like invest in my development, and also will like understand my limitations and not expect me to like pull 12-hour shifts, every day, or like 3 days a week, and then 8-hour shifts the other 2 days a week, because, they're a mom and pop shop, and, they will work for free and sort of expect you to as well. And so, yeah, I just always had a drive for like more, to find more opportunity for myself. I started doing like contracting gigs at coffee trade shows like Coffee Fest for like companies that needed help working their booth or things like that. I started attending latte art throwdowns in the city, because they go on like a monthly basis, and it's its own community as well. And I started, dabbling in competing in U.S. coffee champs, and just being more involved. And because of that, like, I met my husband, who works in like the green side of coffee as well. So opening up like a whole new door for me.
Yeah.
I met like some of my best friends who are like latte art champions, and like who have pushed me to see that as a real discipline as well, and to put like some heart and soul into that. And I have also become really close with other like people, like coffee community members who volunteer to make U.S. Coffee Champs run, and who are really interested in making sure that the U.S. specialty coffee scene evolves, and that it has our voice, and that I just met so many different types of people who were into so many different things, and just the way that I'm kind of like, oh, I want to try all of it. So now I'm a manager at Coffee Project, which I don't know if you know them, but New York-based coffee company, roaster, specialty coffee association, Premier Academy, like wholesaler, competitors, things like that. And yeah, I feel challenged, but also given the resources to take my career further there. So doing that, kind of pushing myself to work for like a company where there were people there that I like really respected.
Yeah.
Really like wanted to live up to sort of the things that they do as well. Like seeing, these people's names all the time in US Coffee Champs, and wanting to push myself to do things like that. That opened up a lot of doors of possibility for me as well. And, I also volunteer with Get You Some Gear, which like working in the mutual aid like end of the coffee industry is much more like a natural sort of extension of my personhood, rather than just having like a job in something that you love, to be doing mutual aid in something that you love. Like, I've always had a very community focused mindset. I think probably because I like needed so much assistance from like, my community, and I really needed a community growing up. And like, I think I'm a great example of like what community support can achieve, because without the help of other people, and without like other people to show me that I did belong here, like I never would have achieved everything that I, feel like I have now achieved. Yeah. So it's really rewarding for me to like be in that sector of the industry as well, and just like actually work one-on-one with giving coffee professionals more access, which was why, doing Glitter Cat was also awesome for me. And yeah, that's just like a little overview of all the hats.
How was your experience with Glitter Cat?
Well, it was
like, what was it like?
Unique, because it was like the first online iteration of Glitter Cat. And I remember like, it was really early pandemic. Everybody was like in the house. Even like those of us who were employed, like there was no, unless you were, frontline worker, there was no in-person work at that time. And I don't know if it was like that everywhere in the country, but it was like that, up where I was, like in the New York metro area, everything's just closed down for a really long time. And so we really needed something to do. And I think like Glitter Cat was something at that point that I had an awareness of. I had seen like boot camp applications come out, but I was at a point in my coffee career where it was not something that I would do for myself yet. Yeah. You know, like where I would kind of make up reasons, like when really I just didn't feel ready to take the leap, but like, oh, like real things, like, you know, I have a job, I can't just take a week off. Like, oh, I don't even, you know, plan to compete anytime soon or know if I ever want to compete. So like, why would I take this? I just like wasn't ready to take that leap. And then pandemic came around, and when they announced the dietitian, I kind of thought to myself, like, okay, look how much life has changed. Like, if I don't do this now, who knows if I'll ever get an opportunity to be a part of something like this again. And it was really, really intense, the actual experience of competing in the dietitian, because like we got sent like espresso machines, we got sent grinders, we got sent like, yeah, I mean, we had to send all that stuff back, but like we had to build a cafe in our house. Like we had to really intensively for a week, like commit to this competition. And it showed me how much I could do, to be honest. It showed me how much I could figure out. It showed me how proficient I could be in, like, you know, taking something on by fly like that. Mm-hmm. Like, I can picture my performance video right now, and I was literally just like in my kitchen, and I created a whole backdrop, and I got someone to film for me. And
that's crazy.
Like, yeah, it was. I'm really proud of it, to be honest. Even now to this day, when I see people competing in U.S. coffee champs, like in barista champs, I'm like, wow, that's a lot. That's a lot of work. Like, I can't even imagine being up on that stage anymore, or like having that routine. But at one point I was willing to do that in my own home. And it was a tough experience. I definitely, I experienced that same sort of emotional, like thrill of like, okay, like, what am I going to place? You know, like I want to get such and such place. Like, and the sort of like the thrill of just waiting for those scores to be announced, like the feeling of reading your score sheets, like the disappointment. I remember like I went overtime, and it was the difference in me getting like, you know, such and such, like, I think it was like first and third. And I had to like have that moment with myself where I'm like, okay, like in the future, if you want to be a competitor, like take what you've learned from this, you know, the disappointment of like fucking up your score like that, but then like the pride of just having enough, you know, content in the first place that you didn't want to stop your routine, all of those emotional highs and lows. It was such a thrilling feeling. I don't know. I feel like I got so much out of that experience, despite the fact, or not despite the fact, but, you know, just even knowing that it wasn't an experience we all got to share in real life. And like I said before, I'm still so close with like all those people. So it was a really valuable experience to me. And then all the mentorship and just the camaraderie that even the seasons of Glitter Cat after that, like just knowing, like meeting someone for the first time and being like, oh, we were both, you know, a part of this thing, the instant camaraderie, the lifelong connections that it affords you. Yeah. It also so valuable to me.
Yeah, I could see that. Especially during a time where that social isolation was so big in the beginning of COVID. It's like everyone was so repellent of everybody else. So it's like when you were able to finally have that social inner circle, probably like had a lot of those similar struggles, experiencing the same kind of competitiveness too. I feel like that would just automatically kind of like create a really good bond.
Yes. And I know, like, I mean, I'm a really competitive person.
Same.
I found that out about myself. I'd like to say that I'm not, but especially like once I'm good at something, I'm really fucking competitive. I'm a good loser. Don't get me wrong. If I find myself,
I'm glad you are, because I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, not with the one person that I'm comfortable being a sore loser towards is my husband, because I think he gets it, you know.
Yeah.
But that comes up a lot because we have to compete a fair amount in latte art.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I've never personally participated in any throwdowns or any of the competitive side of being a barista. I kind of like really enjoyed the kind of like routine numbness that came from being a barista. It was really second nature after a while of just doing it. So I could just kind of like my ADHD is like, cool, there's so many things going on. I can just focus and plug out. I also never thought I was good enough to do competitive like latte art like that. I've always like
that's a big part of it, right? Like we limit ourselves by setting these standards that like we can't even try unless we deem ourselves to be this good.
I've had a lot of run-in with specific personality types that hasn't really made me want to kind of involve myself with that part of the community. Which is why I kind of retracted for a really long time after being a barista to just doing more production, because I got really burnt out with a lot of the highs and lows that came from working as a barista and working like lead roles, and then a lot of the personality types being so drastically different or really like cliquey.
Yeah.
So I was
is a big one, and also like I would love to touch on that actually.
Yeah, no, go for it. I was about to ask you, I'm like, do you have any like run-ins with your experience having a lot of issues with like personality types or like a lot of people accepting you? Because I know that you had just briefly talked about like being autistic or on the spectrum, and or like with your identity. Like I know that queer identities don't always kind of like coexist completely well, and a lot of things can get thrown in the mix, and like when you're constantly surrounded by that environment as a barista, it becomes a little bit claustrophobic, and it gets a little bit like tightening on strings, and the tension can get a little bit rough, especially during like peak work hours. So that's what I was going to ask. So the fact that you were kind of like on the gun, we're on the same go for it.
Well, that's been one of my lifelong struggles, is like matching other people's personalities or getting along with others, which is not to say that I'm not friendly, because I am. I try to be. I like people, but I do find that often what I like to call my autistic swag does not sit right necessarily with everybody else. Like I communicate differently, and I'm very blunt, and I'm very interested in having conversation that matters. When I see an issue or when I see something that I think should be talked about, should be communicated about, I'm going for it.
Yeah.
And I find that, so I was also very hesitant for a long time to get into the latte art community. Yeah. Because I experienced it as quite a boys club. And I actually so in spite of that, I would show up.
Yeah. Well, good for you.
Well, thank you. I was not always like that, to where, I was willing to be in a space and, be alone and just be like comfortable by myself. But now I am, I kind of have the idea especially ever since I stopped drinking almost 3 years ago, I realized like if I'm fun sober, like if I don't have to drink to have fun or to be fun for other people, I might just be fun for other people. So that gave me the confidence to put myself in social situations that made me uncomfortable. Because if I already had forgone a crutch like that, then I knew I kind of had, the upper hand over my anxiety than other people might be having. Yeah. So, I put myself in those situations, and I struggled, and still kind of struggle to this day with, latte art is a huge boys club. And I've had discourse with a lot of the latte art community over, what I feel to be regressive treatment and a regressive attitude in a space in the coffee industry that I think, should celebrate so many more people than it does. And I actually had a big conflict and controversy because I and one of my good friends, Maxie, spoke out against.
Can I just say Maxie was on the show too?
Yeah, I love I thought that Maxie was also on the show.
This never-ending compilation of so many people from the East Coast being so tight-knit. Oh my God. Maxie was that's a firecracker personality. I was like, I fuck hard with Maxie's personality. So that's great.
Maxie is one of my best friends. I love her so much. Oh yes, Mike, can you see my cat?
I can see your
Is that
cat.
your, yes. She's being naughty. Um, yeah, I love Maxie so much. You know, she was at my wedding. She has been there for me through so much, like highs and lows, good and bad. Like Max is probably one of the first people that I call when, you know, something big is happening to me or I just need someone, you know, to tell something. Like
That's wild.
I also think that Maxie and I became close in because of Instagram and during the pandemic. And yeah, I don't know. My life without Maxie in it, I can't even, I don't want to imagine it.
Aw.
Yeah, I have so much love for that girl. And also
Anyways.
Maxie is I one more
Yeah,
thing.
no,
I was
yeah,
gonna
no.
say
I just figured I was like, oh, I could see you going on a whole trail, and we'll probably get off topic. So I just don't want us to get too far off the
Maxie
wheel.
is just I want to say like one of the people who I think the industry should be like giving flowers to so much more than they are. So I just like real shout outs to Maxie. But oh, and back on like the latte art, you know, community being a boys club, like Maxie is the biggest reason that I stayed in that scene. Was because there was someone else there who I saw was trying to do the same thing that I was trying to do, which was
Love that.
be me and succeed. And me is like not all these other boys, essentially. So be someone completely different and succeed. And yeah, like that, that's empowered me and kept me going to really like, I don't know, hear whether they like it or not, you
Yeah.
know? And I only have the, you know, best intentions and really the best interest in mind of the community because the community
Right.
is not all men. It's really not, and there's it would be so much more visibly not men if people just felt comfortable. Um, you know, I've spoken out about like sexual harassment that goes on. I've spoken out about boys club ism that goes on, about like the misogyny in these spaces, about how before I was with my husband, like there were men who I would see every month at these throwdowns who wouldn't say a word to me or introduce themselves or just be, you know, kind. And then when I got together with my husband, like all of a sudden they would talk to me and introduce themselves to me as if I didn't know who they were for such a long time. Yeah, and and I would say that to them as well. So I
As you
was
should.
not always yeah, I was not always like the most popular for it, but I've always been the kind of person that I'm like, okay, like if no one's gonna tell you, I'm gonna tell you
Right.
because I've got the time essentially, and I'm game for the conflict.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that I see now, especially ever since we spoke on our views about the Coffee Fest latte art scene.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that was a really, I want to say, formative conflict for me, even though it was kind of fairly recent, because I learned so much from just speaking my mind about something that I happened to notice. I learned so much from people who were like willing to have genuine conversation with me. I learned so much from people who assumed immediately that they knew what I meant and therefore started treating me a certain way. I learned so much from people who were, you know, like genuinely just trying to clarify certain things. Like I was at, you know, it was not that I was correct from, you know, my very first assumption about how the scene treats, you know, non-men, treats people of color, about, you know, who has more opportunity. I mean, that was not wrong,
Right.
but some of the things that, you know, I didn't understand or I thought were a completely different way than they are. I had people able to, you know, speak to me and teach me something as well about why it takes, you know, some people so long to come up in the scene and why others sort of immediately take off.
Yeah.
And I learned, you know, that there was room for my view to improve as well. And I'm always down for those teachable moments. I don't shy away from them. Like I don't think that I was born knowing everything,
Yeah.
and I'm still, you know, I'm still a young person in this industry, and so I understand that, you know, there are social dynamics, there are like industry like historical events that like I wasn't around for and I wasn't privy to and I'm always happy to learn but yeah, I consider that situation to be so valuable, even though I think for a lot of people, it really soured their impression of me, that I would kind of accuse men of being men, or like accuse, this society of favoring them. And that's fine, because then I know, who I kind of essentially have to look out for to see like if they are perpetuating these things or not. But I also really think that since we spoke up about that, I have seen, at least in the New York latte art scene, so many more non-men feel comfortable to come out
That's
and to
great
keep
though.
coming out. Yeah. It's been really visible. It's been really, really visible. And like, I fuck with it. That's what I want to see. Like, I
Yeah.
don't want people to just be, especially, I don't want like young non-men to just be like standing around, like scared that no one is going to talk to them, and like scared that they're never going to get better. Because the first time that you compete in latte art, you almost always suck. Because no matter how good you are at latte art, like the nerves that you're
Yeah.
trying to overcome to perform in like a sudden death style showdown in front of a bunch of people, like that's a whole new skill in and of itself that you only achieve by showing up. So people are already discouraged off the bat, and to be able to see like more people that are not men like overcome that discouraged feeling and just keep coming back, like that's all I want to see. I just want for them to be able to do that. They
So
don't have to like me. They don't have to want me there. I want that, that
yeah.
diverse community.
So what would your advice be for the people who do show up but they're too anxious to continue? You know what I mean? Like they could show up and be like, okay, I'm gonna put myself outside of my comfort zone, and show up and they're like, oh yeah, I just don't see how I can fit.
Well, my thought has always been like, what's the worst that can happen? And the worst that can happen is kind of that you lose and that nobody talks to you, right? But I have I have gone so many times to a latte art throwdown where A, nobody talked to me, and B, I also lost. And it sucked at first, or I don't know, it didn't even really suck that bad. Like the alternative is just kind of staying home or doing whatever else. But like, A, you will make a friend. There will be someone there who you will connect with, especially if you see them over and over again, because the coffee industry is full of great people. And B, you will eventually win. It's just a numbers game, like you're not always going to be the new person that shows up. And if you can just take, a few losses in both areas here and there, eventually you'll start seeing like, oh, I know more people now. I do a little better now. Just don't give up, because we need you there. And chances are someone else, especially if you're a non-man and you're showing up consistently to these events, someone else that is also not a man notices, trust me, and they're happy that you're there. And also maybe go talk to them.
Bond.
Yes.
So having traversed a lot of the barista world and doing a lot of competitive stuff, I know that you had briefly mentioned how you're doing education now. Where is this trajectory leading you? Like where at this point, like now that you have a lot of different experiences, what's the realm that you're like finding yourself a lot more like, yeah, I want to stay here in the coffee world?
Well, I haven't gotten to any place that I want to stay yet. I want to keep making new experiences and keep kind of dabbling in many things. Taking a serious long-term management position, which is like what I'm doing right now, is new to me.
Yeah.
Wanting to, be so reliable and responsible and like committed essentially to like one shop, one location, that takes a lot, and it's only because like I have an incredible team of staff. I feel so like blessed because I work, so the coffee shop that I manage is in the LGBTQ center of Manhattan. And so I also get to work amongst my community all day.
That's fucking amazing.
It really is. It really, really is. It's a nonprofit, so obviously it has its own issues and politics and whatnot,
Yeah.
but I can't stress enough just like how valuable the experience of like just being around gay people all day is, like to another gay person, like just to like I don't know. I had to work in a shop, in like heteronormative society. Like people would assume that, I'm like she, her, a girl, or that like I'm straight, or like people would just assume that upon seeing me, unless like, and like you can peep that I have green hair and pronouns just from seeing me. But chances are that's like, only 1 in every 10 people.
Yeah.
So being in a place where the norm is non-heteronormative,
Yeah.
it's allowed me to just be a different version of myself as a professional. And, we see a lot of like the most vulnerable members of our community because we're just an open space, like for unhoused people, for people seeking services, for people who are going to groups, who are in recovery, we see very vulnerable members of the community, and like getting to just be there for them as well, and to really like witness people and to provide a customer. It can be a lot of emotional labor, I'm not gonna lie, and you definitely have to sign up for it. Or be aware that you're doing that. But I find it very fulfilling to have interactions with people that are not just like a customer service facade, and to actually like get to care for my community. So yeah, being, and also like my staff is just so sweet. I love them all. Just like Gen Z fucking queer people. And like, I'm 27, so of course they think I'm 50 years old, but like,
you and I are literally the same age, and I feel like I'm 50 years old, to be honest.
Right? The youngins are making me feel old now.
I don't even care about the lingo. It's the fact that I'm like, man, when I was their age. It comes out now. I'm like, man, when I was that age. Literally, man, when that was the biggest thing that was going on in my life. Yeah, it's funny how shit's changed.
Oh my God. To two of my coworkers, I was like, you literally don't even remember 9/11. And they're like, yeah, no. And I was like, that's crazy. Like,
I grew up during that, yeah.
Yeah, like I was cognizant. Like we all know where we were,
Yeah,
or,
that's wild.
Like, whatever. It is wild. And then I have a coworker who's like 24 or 25, and my 20-year-old and my 21-year-old coworker like both compared that coworker to like a Larry David. And I'm like, okay, what am I, fucking dead? Because like I'm older than them.
You're a walking ghost for these people.
Literally, yes.
I will say that I think that like working in a really non-heteronormative atmosphere, there's so much nuance and like cognitive behaviors, and like there's a word that I can't think of right now, but it's like the social aspect of things not needing to be communicated, nonverbal, where it's just like that's gotta feel so comforting.
Yes.
Go
ahead.
I was gonna say there's a break of this like sad reality that comes from living a very heteronormative lifestyle, that there's like it affects how we communicate with people, especially people who are very queer identifying and very vocal with their opinions and political stances. It's something that's really hard to like go about life and have to stifle all the time, versus like being in a space where none of that kind of exists. It's just like free fall, and it's just thrown into the wind. And as chaotic as that can be, it can also be extremely emotionally nurturing and affirming. Yes. But yes, the queer community has its faults and it has its positives.
Yes, definitely. There's, drawbacks to every community has its weaknesses, right? Yeah. But as opposed to like, I think a lot of us who have worked in the coffee industry for a long time and also are queer have found that it's a place where queer identities often get like appropriated, or they get taken advantage of, but not often celebrated, because we're drawn to this industry. There's, so many queer people in the coffee community, but maybe the ownership of their shop, are just like, are not queer friendly, or are just kind of are capitalizing on that, on that image, so to speak, the image of their baristas, but they're not really there for their baristas. They're not,
that's true.
There to stand up for them.
I've seen that time and time again.
Exactly. Yeah. So to be in a place where I know that is like truly celebrated, that definitely means a lot to me. So that's kind of the reason why I, wanted to take a management role there, is because I wanted to like be a leader in that community and be someone who could be relied on in that community and for my baristas. But honestly, I see myself getting more into the green side of coffee.
Come over to the dark side.
Yes. Well, I know that, that's kind of where the focus in this podcast has been, with people who are on the green side of the industry. And I'm definitely
I was going to say, if you're interested, not to self-promote, but I'm self-promoting.
Please.
This podcast highlights a lot of shit. I'm not going to lie. Like, I've learned a lot. Like, I've said this throughout so many of my episodes, and I don't know if you've actually listened to them or not. But
I haven't yet.
That's fine.
I'm gonna have to listen to at least 2 of them.
I was gonna say, at least when Maxie's and Alex's come, like Alex's was the second episode. It was a great way to kick off the show. But Maxie's is gonna be, woo! It's a conglomerate of so much chaos. It's such a representation of that energy. But
yes.
No, when I started this journey of this podcast versus where I'm at now, the way that I've accounted so much information that I think that I would have never been able to do. Because, like, what sucks about my position where I stand, wow, what's wrong with my voice? From the position where I stand is, like, the Midwest has a very closeted, gate-kept roasting community. Like, a lot of the production industry here isn't as open and willing, from the experiences I've had being a person of color and being queer. It's very male, white, cisgender predominant, and it's been really hard for me to create community. It's been really hard for me to feel comfortable to do that also. And with my personality type, I'm just the most easily lovable person on the planet. But
I mean, I think that we would get along really well, but
like, honestly, if you get along with Maxie, I fucked hard with Maxie and I fucked hard with Alex. Like,
yeah,
I think in general, I'm living on the wrong side of the fucking country. But
I agree. I think you have to come to the East Coast.
Yeah, you and me both. But yeah, I had a really hard time acclimating myself into the industry. I exposed myself through going to an SCA retreat. That opened my eyes to a whole lot of other things. And that's how this kind of created the umbrella of this entire podcast. And then this has been the only way I can learn about the industry, really, because there's really no way outside of, like, going on, like, Sprudge or the Daily Coffee News. So, like, this has been a lot of, like, my absorption of, like, how to learn about the industry, especially from the coffee production aspect. And I've been grateful to meet amazing people along the way. And a lot of these women and people of color and queer folk that have been on the show have been so transparent and raw about a lot of their experiences, which I appreciate you also being on this and saying the same as well. That it's like, I always feel like I have learned so much more shit underneath the covers of what my job is versus what my actual job entails. And that makes a lot of what I feel like my job is right now a lot more meaningful, because I can apply a lot of the stuff that I've learned through these people to a lot of the work that I'm doing now. So I have learned a lot of amazing things. I think the production industry is a interesting dynamic shift from being in a lot of the, no, I'm not trying to be offensive, but like a lot of the showmanship that comes from being a barista.
No, you're right. I mean, it is, front of house is so customer centric and so appearance centric.
Yeah.
And it really is, you see certain types of people succeed easily and certain type of people struggle and are marginalized repeatedly. And, that's socio, that's like, that's social dynamics, that's social hierarchy. And, it can be a welcome challenge. And for a while, I have to thank that side of the industry for giving me people skills, and for giving me hands-on experience, even though it was trial by fire. And it always has been for me, being autistic and trying to be a person with people, and, but it has done a lot for me, and especially has helped me deepen my empathy. But I also feel so in meeting my husband, who was born in a coffee growing community in Colombia, and who came to the States, and really wished to continue to work in coffee and to bring his family into his everyday life. And, he imports coffee from his community back home in Nariño. And for me, also being Ecuadorian, And going back earlier, to my ancestral lands, and like going with my father who immigrated here when he was much younger, and also going to coffee growing regions in Ecuador and meeting coffee people in Ecuador and creating like a bond. I was really, really fortunate actually to make an incredible, friend with Juan Pablo, who is one of the co-founders of Coffee Relief in Ecuador, which like they won Spudgy for like best build out in 2022 and then best new cafe in 2023, or like 2020, Wild. Like two consecutive years. Yeah. And to like meet them and be like, oh wow, like, I'm so proud of my Ecuadorian heritage. And it means a lot to me also in how I view the world and the things that I hold important to me, like how, we should treat the earth, how, we should treat our people, like what kind of community support we should give our, our community, and the countries should give their people. And just like Ecuadorians are really like, we have this quality of just like lovingness, like we call it cariñoso, which is just like really just a deep love and affection for like your fellow person. And to get to not
Arabs
only,
have a lot of that same quality, by the way.
Right. Well, my mom is actually Syrian. So,
okay.
Yeah. So I'm Syrian Jewish.
Bro, that's wild.
Yeah.
There's so much going on.
There's a lot. And so like both of these reasons and like both of these aspects of my heritage, like when I say that people are the most important thing to me, like I mean it. Being someone from like a Syrian Jewish background, like I have seen my people like marginalized, and I have seen them, face such atrocities, and I have seen like conflict and struggle, right? And then also being South American in one of the 3 poorest countries in South America, where the U.S. love to be meddling, where also, big oil companies love to come in and infringe on indigenous lands, drill in the Amazon, like deforest, like ruin, kill the Galapagos, kill some of our biodiversity. Like these things, they mean so much to me that no matter what I would have ended up doing in life, the ancestral call to just care about all of these things will always come to the front. I can tell that you know where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
Like, so when I got to experience that firsthand, and I went and I bonded with coffee people in Ecuador, and I saw how beautiful it was to be connected at origin. And then also very shortly thereafter fell in love with someone who grew up on a coffee farm, and his fondest memories are growing alongside coffee, literally. And it's how he feels close to his family, like while he's here and they're over there. Like the green side of the industry is calling to me, and also to fucking leave America and go, be with people who understand me and who I can, who I can actually get into community with. Like that desire is strong too, because we're all very polarized in America. Like even the left is very polarized in America. It's hard to get things done. It's hard to like get on the same page. It's hard to all be working towards the same community initiative. I
wonder what you're hinting at right now.
I'm hinting at a lot.
Oh, man. Here's the thing, though. I will be totally transparent. There was an episode where there's a whole segment we talk politics. So, like, that's why I'm like, I wonder what you're hinting at.
Oh, okay, yeah. Because I don't want to, like, blow up your spot here.
For what?
Well, I don't know. I don't know how controversial you want me to get, because I can get really controversial.
Well, that's the whole purpose of this podcast. I didn't want people to be nice and pretty.
The beans are without boundaries. The beans are without boundaries.
There shouldn't be boundaries, but yeah.
Yes, I completely agree. I find myself still trying to, a large part of, for me, becoming more acceptable and becoming more professional was learning, when to be quiet. Because I've never had to push myself too hard to come out of my shell. So
I can relate to that.
yeah, so I felt like my journey in becoming an adult was learning to draw it back a little more.
I
But
will
these
ask.
things are important.
I will ask too. Like, are you like a first generation immigrant? Like, were your parents like from the countries and then moved here?
My father was born in Ecuador and my mother was born here.
Okay, so you still have like that
I'm
sense.
first in on my father's side.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I think that either way, like immigrant households, children from immigrant households, we all have the same fucking experiences.
Yes, very, very similar, at least for all of us, I think.
I was gonna say I fuck with a lot of the same vibes that I've met from a lot of Latinas and Latinos, who are like children of immigrants, because I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of the same kind of nuances that exist.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of like inheriting our parents' traumas.
Generational trauma.
Yes, and I, as a Jew, experienced pretty heavy generational trauma as well, despite the fact that like my mother's side of the family has been here for 2 or 3 generations.
Yeah.
They were immediately displaced by World War II. So it's been a little while, but not that long.
To go back to the original subject.
Yes.
Let's go back to the world of coffee.
Find our way back. Yes.
That I am very glad to hear your connections with, and like the amount of intimacy that you have with it, touching down from your roots to the person that you've chosen as your partner, to how you choose to interact with it in daily life.
The intimacy, I love that.
Yeah, I feel like that's what it is. I feel like, especially with the way that you've been talking about things, there's a sense of extreme intricacy and intimacy that exists in a lot of what you want to do for your life, because that's what it means for you. That's what you've been kind of like, those ethics and morals have been put onto you, which is great, because that gives you a pathway and a trajectory to living a more fulfilling and satisfying life. Yes,
I agree completely.
The nuances in between are kind of like iffy, and the ups and highs and the lows and the whatever are going to be there, and like you'll meet people that'll test you. But overall, I feel like...
Oh, I've met many. I've met many that like to test me.
Yeah, I feel like... What part of the coffee, like green, are you interested in? Are you interested in importing? Are you interested in roasting? Are you interested in quality? Are you interested in...
I'm interested in supporting the growing coffee communities in coffee producing countries.
So economic development.
Yeah, or humanitarian effort, economic
That's
development.
awesome.
Yes.
That's something I've been recently interested in too. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's okay. No, keep going.
But I had somebody on this episode. Her name is Ruth. She works for Artisan Coffee Imports. Great woman. She stands for a lot of great qualities, and she's doing a lot of great things for the countries she's involved in. So essentially, she's creating these funding and like essentially giving it to the communities for a lot of what they've already built for themselves. So it's not like white savior complex where I need to fix everything. It's more like, so what you're doing has worked for your community. I'm going to reinforce that. And that really like kickstarted a lot of my interest with economic development. So it's like, cool that you're also interested in doing that too.
Yes. I think that is for a lot of people, especially a lot of like people of color, that is such a pillar of how we believe that our culture survives, right? Is that we do well for ourselves and then we put back into it. And you can see that in like in the ways where like multi-generational households are a common thing, where you're raised by someone and then at the end of their life, when they can't do it for themselves anymore, they come live with you because you've built the kind of life for yourself where you can accommodate for them and things like that. And even just the idea of so many people who come to America just to work really fucking hard for 6 months and send all that money back to their family, or to anyone who needs it where they come from, because not everyone can come to America in the first place, can weather that journey, can, do that sort of hard work, just the work of immigrating and then the work of working nonstop for so long. I find that, when speaking to other people of color from many backgrounds, not just Latinos, that like we all kind of have this idea of like, do it for the culture, right? Do it for the people. My husband, as like a coffee importer, one of the coffees that he imports from Aponte, it like all the proceeds go to rebuilding the indigenous Aponte community.
Love that.
The reason that they even started selling this blend was because the indigenous community there, their village was all built into the side of a mountain. And so because of, just weather and earth and natural disaster, their community began to essentially collapse.
Yeah.
And this is where these people, they wanted to live. This is where their ancestral home was,
Yeah.
This is also where everything that they had was. And so the coffee that they were growing directly went to rebuilding that community.
Yeah.
And that's just like, that's so what I expect of my people, like to be hardworking and driven and also crafty and resourceful as hell to know, to be like, hey, like, let's put that money right back in here.
Yeah.
And so I think that the countries that I would want, like, I don't see myself necessarily bouncing around to a different multitude of different coffee producing countries to sort of impart what I've learned and my secrets and this and that. Like, no, it's more so that the country like Ecuador and now Colombia that my loved one and his family are also from, like, that's where I feel like I can go to come back home, where my future. Yeah, well, like, it's a home, it's a home.
I love when I'm like, that's pretty. And you're like, yeah, well.
I don't know what to say. It's just what I think. Yeah, well, I guess it's true. I mean, I guess it is poetic. Like, it is sort of idealistic, but that's really how it feels, is that this is the home I'm working towards. Like, I've never felt at home, where I've been. I know that home is a place that I'm working to go. And I think a lot of children of immigrants feel that way. Our parents were sold an American dream that didn't exist. We were sold, the leftovers of that fantasy. But most of us have, seen what our parents have gone through and what our communities have gone through enough to know that what is really worth working for is not what they were sold in the first place. And so I think a lot of us are reckoning with the fact that our journey is to go back, is to bring it back.
I will also add on to that. I remember having this conversation with my mom too when I was growing up in America during 9/11. I remember I'm like,
9/11, by the way.
I did, because it affected me and my family. But like, I remember coming home all the time as a kid. I'm like, Mom, I fucking hate it here. Like, I don't want to live in America. Like, why'd you choose Ohio? Like, da da da. And she's just like, what do you mean, America?
Which is such a valid question, by the way. Like, why did you choose Ohio?
There's no Iraqi community here, by the way. Like, it doesn't really exist in Ohio. And
so why did they choose Ohio?
Who fucking knows? I asked that question and I don't even have an answer anymore. But I remember, and she would be like, what do you mean? America's great. Like, the way that answer has changed in the last decade is wild. Like, my mom was so driven on being so patriotic of being an American, to the last 5 years, it being just...
We're over it now.
She's like, if you can leave, leave. Like, I don't want you here either. And it's just like, I also understand this constant disconnect from not feeling connected to a homeland that's not ours in the first place. But, like, it's not ours times 2.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. That's something that has definitely been, like, a lifelong identity struggle for me. Like, what am I? Am I an American? Because the Americans don't want me.
Same.
And they don't appreciate my worldview. Am I an Ecuadorian? Because I'm not Ecuadorian enough for these Ecuadorians. It's really, really tough. And I think that immigrant children culture is almost just a culture of its own.
Yeah.
It's almost a diaspora of its own. And I think that, that's great in the term that it means that a whole generation of people who are more global thinking has been, brought into creation.
Yeah.
But so sad that so many of our, like, empathetic hearts that, have just years and years and years and generations of the same culture, just nurturing it and feeding into it, it's got to be programmed into our DNA. Now we're just, like, left without it.
Yeah.
Like someone who lost their twin in the womb. Like, there's just a part of us that is not accessible, we're chasing towards, that we're always chasing towards and trying to create our own individual cultural meaning to. I mean, not to be like, certainly not the biggest proponent of mixed kids have it harder or anything like that, but like, it is weird when, both your cultures don't really know what to do with you, or don't see, the Latinos see me as more of an American Jew, and then the Jews definitely don't see me as one of them. They see a Latino, and then the white people, they don't know what they see. They don't like it,
Oh my God.
So I'm just like, what is going to be enough? Like, if Spanish were my first language, but I still looked the way I looked and had a Jewish mother, like, would you guys accept me more? Or like, if I was bat mitzvahed and I spoke Hebrew, would people stop questioning the validity of my Judaism? But at the end of the day, the answer is that I have found that when you assert who you are and you put yourself in those spaces and you say, I belong here, eventually people start to realize that, someone who chooses you is your community. And there's retroactive acceptance in that way. I have, I definitely won't say the Latinos have rejected me. I mean, that is all of my close friends, family, my husband, I'm accepted by my community, but I feel the difference, in myself. And
you ever feel like sometimes it's just like a tolerance?
Sometimes I think I used to feel that way.
Maybe that's where I'm at.
I think I used to feel that way, and I think that now I have found people who really love me and accept me and see me, and that when you know yourself well enough to show up and be like, hey, this is me. Don't try and tell me anything different because I'm not going to hear it. People respect that, and people give heed to how you show up. I think that if you question who you are, people are much more quick to try and label it for you.
I feel like I've always struggled with that, especially in my own community, because the Arab women are perceived a specific way in our own community. And like, we have a specific level of participation we're almost quote unquote allowed with. And like, the oppression that exists just in the female community alone, among the female community as well. I mean, like, I also grew up with like old like Arabs versus like a lot of what the newer generation's experiencing. So it's like I always have this imposter syndrome, and I always have this sense of like, I'm only being tolerated in their space versus being actually accepted for who I am, because I'm so far left field. Going back to what you were saying about like, I'm not Arab enough for Arabs, and I'm not American enough for Americans. And I'm not even perceived by a lot of people as an entity. I'm a constant, ambiguous thing that exists, that is mislabeled, mispronounced by name. Like, it's just a constant thing. So it's like...
That's really true. I think I've desensitized myself to a lot of that, like, otherism feeling, because in personality, I feel like I'm like very similar to you, like, and I think, we're easy to pick out in a room where we're loud and we're here. And I guess at a certain point, I think it became a coping mechanism for me to not expect to be accepted and to instead embrace being one of a kind. That's kind of just like how I see myself now. Like, I do have community, and I have people that I align myself with, but I do see myself as one of a kind. Like, I think everyone is individual, and so to find that you don't see anyone who reminds you exactly of yourself, like, you can feel proud of that too. Not just let it make you feel othered.
This has felt like a therapy episode. Damn.
Too preachy, but
no, I love when like episodes actually get emotional versus it just is like spouting stuff.
Well, I so part of me, like, is a person who, I'm not cynical. I'm definitely not cynical. I speak loudly about things that upset me, but I'm such a grateful, like, happy person,
Yeah.
believe it or not, because, and this is something that I've even heard my parents say about me, like, as a child, I struggled so hard. Like, no one thought I would live this long. We all thought that I would have, not to, trigger warning for mental health stuff, but like, we all thought that I would have ended my life by now because I tried a lot, in my late teen years, and I hit rock bottom and I felt
Yeah.
hopeless, and I struggled so badly with mental illness and not feeling like I would ever be loved for who I was. And I don't know if like what came first, other people loving me or me learning to love myself. But at this point, like I feel that I'm so precious for having survived it all, for not only having survived it all, but having created a life of meaning that brings other people joy and, that connects. And like, I really know my life is worth something. I see the way I am able to touch and be touched by others. I see the way, important life altering events are always happening in my
Yeah.
life and around me. And like, I accepted at one point that, to be special is probably really difficult. And so that's just the two sides of this coin that I'm experiencing. So, I'm grateful. I'll like talk myself up any way I need to just give myself the strength to keep living my life and to not let anybody take any moment of the feeling of possibility from me. That's, kind of why I poeticize like my motivation for just continuing on. Romanticize your life a little.
I have said this with every East Coast / New York guest.
I'm from New Jersey.
Well, bitch, you still on the East Coast.
I know. And I rep New York, but I feel the need to just say.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to join you in a whole conglomerate of a whole other type of people.
That's okay.
But I say this where I'm like, literally, all the people who I want in my daily life don't live here.
Come to New York or New Jersey. We'll show you a great time.
I have been told this a few times.
Yes, definitely. Me and Maxie, at least, we'll take you out.
That would be the best night ever. Talk about loud people being loud unapologetically. Fucking
100%.
crazy. It'd be wild.
It would be amazing. It would be amazing.
You're just so great.
Thank you. That's very nice of you. I want to be a person who other people have a positive experience knowing.
You just have a really good aura about you too. Like, it's very warm and it's very like, it's just very much like, oh, well, we've just been friends for the last 3 years and we're just catching up kind of vibe.
I try to be very open.
I can see that.
So
yeah.
I'm glad that I hope it has the effect where other people feel that they can also tap into that around me.
Yeah, I could see that 100%.
But yeah, I just, there's a time for Hyacinth with the sharp edges. And I don't like that time to be often, to be honest.
Yeah.
And then
when is your birthday? We're talking about this, whatever about the episode, but when's your birthday?
What do you think my sign is?
You give me Pisces energy, or you give me like, damn. Yeah. Cancer, maybe?
I'm a Cancer, yes. I was going to say you were close with Pisces.
It's just full water energy.
Yes, I am the most Cancerian Cancer. I'm a Cancer sun, I'm a Gemini moon, and I'm a rising Leo. I have a lot of Gemini in my chart, though.
Oh, fuck!
So mysterious.
How about you, like, guess my sign?
I feel like you're a fire sign.
What gave that away?
Are you, by any chance... well, I want to say Leo. Are you a Leo?
Everybody always guesses it wrong, which is funny.
No. Are you an Aries?
Yeah. Okay, I got a lot of Aries
gotcha.
in my chart, too.
I get along well with Aries.
What's Maxie's? I didn't ask theirs.
Maxie is a Leo.
That fucking checks.
I think Maxie's a July Leo, if I remember correctly, but I could be wrong. I think end of July is Maxie's birthday. Yes, I think that. But Maxie, I'm so sorry if that's wrong. But I know that she's a Leo for a fact.
Yeah.
She might be August 5th.
Two different types of Leos there.
Yeah, definitely. But also everything else, I think everything else in your chart is just so much more important than what side of your
okay, so do you so my sun sign's in Aries. You ready for this shit? You ready for this shit?
Yes, I'm ready.
My moon's a Scorpio.
Okay.
And then my rising's a Taurus.
Okay.
So I'm a lot
in there, I think. I think the Taurus is really great in there because
you can have it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's this constant RBF that I carry and this constant lack of fashion sense and the constant amount of times where I'm just so like, if I'm not comfortable going, you're not going to catch me there.
Well, that's so fair. Why waste your time on others? But also Tauruses have natural leadership abilities, which I think is a good way to channel the unabashed, principled nature of Aries, but self-principled, but still principles. And just the general bossiness, maybe, that Scorpios tend to have about them.
Yeah, I'm emotionally intense.
That's totally... I respect that caliber of person more than any U.S. Marine.
You can take it. This amount of aggressive feeling of feelings is so exhausting. Like, I'm exhausted.
Yeah,
and
it's God gives his toughest battles.
What's your Mercury?
Also a Cancer.
No wonder you're so good with words.
I hear that's a Gemini moon thing as well, but my Mars and my Venus are in Gemini. So
here's the thing.
Gemini signs.
There's a difference between being good with your words emotionally and intellectually. I think you're an intellectual. I think you are very eloquent with ways of how you're expressing yourself, but there's a sense of like meaning and emotional aspect that comes a lot from that water placement.
Oh, I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to be more emotionally verbose than I am just needlessly intellectually verbose.
Well, you got to hone that skill in and focus on it.
For sure, because when I was in first grade, I had a teacher who actually used to get mad at how much I would raise my hand and want to speak in class. Like,
oh yeah, no, I'd be like, who keeps asking questions? Let's like have the class over.
Come on, let's get it going.
Literally.
I think she felt like I was just like vying for attention.
That's funny. I have a lot of Aries placements, so like Aries Sun, Aries Mercury, and Aries Mars. So like I'm just a fucking dragon.
I love that. I really do love that. That reminds me, did you ever watch the Jackie Chan cartoon?
Yeah! Remember, we're the same age.
Oh, yes. Very fair. That reminds me specifically of that dragon.
Fuck.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's what Aries energy gives me.
I have been told I give snake, serpent, rattlesnake energy, which I fuck hard.
That's very similar. I love
that.
Yeah.
Just love it.
Snake energy is snakes. So when I think of like animals that like I kind of identify with, snakes is definitely one of them. And then like squids, like giant squids. Squids
for you for
I have a big tattoo on my back of like octopus tentacles.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Like the eldritchness of those creatures like really calls out to me.
I always wanted a praying mantis tattoo. I felt like that really embodied my energy too.
I could say the same, to be honest.
Also, it's really funny.
Get it.
My partner has also an Aries stellium with me. So they are an Aries sun, an Aries moon, and a rising Cap.
How do y'all do it?
Well.
So much intensity.
Well. I mean,
I guess you just are both gluttons for the punishment.
Honestly, it's not as chaotic as I feel like everyone points it out to be, because that rising Cap really like hones shit in, and they also have a Mars in Virgo, and they have a Taurus Mercury. So they still have like throughout their chart like good balance of earth energy. They just don't have any water energy. So the person that's the explosive volcano doesn't have a competition, and she just like goes on these rampades of hurricanes. And then there's this person that's just a rock that doesn't move. It's great.
Well, good. I think everybody needs their rock for sure. I don't have any earth signs in my chart, I don't think.
Rip.
Yeah, for real. Yes, the emotional regulation is not there. It's a lot of, there's just my Cancer. That's really the only, like, the Sun and the Mercury. That's the only water sign. Most of it is
your
air.
Venus in Gemini too?
Yes.
Same. Boo!
Gemini.
Intellectual stimulation,
yes.
Intellectual wittiness, banter, sarcasm, all of it. Yep.
Riz, all the Riz.
We do got that though.
That's like my favorite new slang term that I have heard.
Don't be
young
old.
People use. Please.
Don't be old.
Don't be old. Come on.
It's the way you said Riz, and I was like, cool, we're all on the same page. And then you're like, yeah, it's like all the new slang, and I'm like, you just outed yourself.
I'm not ashamed. I'm not scared to out myself. I will be honest and say that Riz, I had not heard anybody say that before like 2 months ago, I feel like. And then all of a sudden,
yeah, because you're living under a rock.
I don't have TikTok, so I am living under a rock. Yeah, I can't. I personally would take way too much time out of my day.
But I'm actually surrounded by a lot of like younger people now. So it's like
I feel like same. But I actually really love it.
Things.
So
they're a whole different breed.
Right?
Yeah.
So you're also right on the cusp of like millennial and Gen Z.
Watching the transformation, I find myself having a lot more millennial qualities than Gen Z.
I agree. But
watching these Gen Z kids is crazy.
Yes. I love it, personally.
I have a love-hate relationship with it.
Well, sure. I mean, everybody always, there's always that generation shaking their fist into the sky at the youngins, and everyone will grow to fulfill that prophecy. But I love to see Gen Z, like, just so easily get away with shit that, like,
we would have never done.
So weird for. Yeah. Exactly. That I felt so alien for in my childhood, or never would have thought, like, I would be cool to do. And I love that for them.
They've definitely changed a lot of what the status quo is, which is like great because it basically like, I think what we lacked in a lot of our generation growing up was this like destruction of toxic masculinity versus like that's kind of like being broken apart and like almost like shunned at this point for the younger generation. So there's this like embodiment of emotional space that's open and free to explore through creative outlets, through verbal outlets and it's just great to see because we weren't basically allowing ourselves to kind of have that element. So we kind of I think it's like the best way to describe Gen Z and our generation, that in between, is the fact that we were like, Gen Z is direct. They go for what they want. They are not going to settle for what they don't want, and then they're going to create. Versus us, we were nonverbal the entire generation. Like I heard, like I feel like we just always knew what was going on, and we spoke in these nuances where it was like, let me leave this little nugget, and then they pick it up and they leave their little nugget, and then there's just like maybe that nugget will kind of like meet, and then we'll talk about it for like 5 or 10 minutes, or we'll talk about it for 2 hours, and then that's it. Versus like these are activists. And like a lot of these protests that are coming about that they've started, like I would have never seen myself ever having the balls to do, which is where these like love-hate things come. I'm like, they have such a fierce like passion to see justice. And I mean, on the flip side, there's a lot of other things, but like
there's other things as well. But I do generally share that sentiment by and large about Gen Z, especially. I mean, I definitely feel like we walked so they could run. And we were like searching for people with like-minded interests on like Tumblr so that they could have just like their regular old community.
Man,
but,
I mean, if you think about it,
I'm happy to do that for them.
I was gonna say, if you think about it too, like Gen Z for the most part are around our age group of their parents. Like they're kind of like mini like millennials there who are their parents that are kind of trying to reinforce the things that we didn't get. So it makes sense.
Very true. I'm obsessed with soft parenting.
Soft parenting is interesting.
Yes. I don't know if you've seen like this trend. It's basically just not using negative reinforcement with your children, and not yelling at them, and like being like very thoroughly communicative, very thoroughly like bringing awareness to feelings, just I'm obsessed with seeing like parents on Instagram and like, like finding like getting somehow TikTok vids will still come to me even though I don't actually use
because Instagram's basically TikTok.
Yes, everything is basically TikTok now, but seeing like parents just completely like empathize, reason with, and give space to their small child's large emotions, because that is just something that would have so like changed me.
Yeah.
If I had experienced that as a child, like the idea, and I mean, my parents and I, we've been through a very, very long journey. I was actually just talking about this with my nail tech earlier, but my both of my parents did so much work on themselves. Like my dad particularly, which I know is the dream for like most people, but like I can genuinely say that like my dad completely, became the man in my adulthood, of course. So, I had to parent myself in the meantime, but became the man who I needed him to be when I was a kid. And
damn, me and you are good. Ugh, God, I really relate to this, but on the mother spectrum, like,
okay.
So I was just
like me and my mother had a renaissance of our own as well, more so on like my behalf of being able to understand her rather than my father's behalf of being able to communicate it, and also like let go of a lot of his like authoritarian like for Latino machismo bullshit. But yeah, like my parents now, like they get that, and we talk about all the time like how people should just like give their kids just love, and like safety, and like especially I found that in like especially like brown communities and brown cultures, like why are we so afraid of quote unquote spoiling our children? How do you spoil a child?
I will say, I'm not also backing up the way that I was treated as a child, but I will say for just trying to humanize the villain that we grew up with in our brains, like the only thing that made sense to me was my parents gave the love that they received.
Right.
So it's just like, if that was their way and that and every other person's families around them was the way they received love, that looked like normal to them. And especially because we come from different backgrounds, different generational times, what we have accessibility to. Their idea of family might have never changed from when they left their home country versus when they actually started having children. And then I think that even if they were exposed to different cultures, didn't still change their values, because if their cultural values is still the same back home, it makes sense to why they'd still treat their children, especially if they're being displaced from their original country. They want to still instill like those ethics, morals, and principles. Now, it's not always healthy. It can be chaotic and create really bad dissonance in terms of relationship building, especially when you're raised after that biculturally American and whatever your national heritage is. But like that's how I've been able to kind of come to peace with the way that I was raised, is that I was only given the love that my mom was given. And then when my mom wasn't around, I got it from my grandparents. And like that's older than even my mom, like we're talking like 1930s. And then my mom was 1970s, like totally different times. So it's like I have this really interesting perspective that just created a whole fucking problem when I tried to build a relationship with my mom. Like my dad wasn't in the picture, so that's whatever. But the way that kind of got healed was when we were completely apart and just not speaking. And then when we reconvened, it was over a traumatic experience. And then she started going to therapy. And if anybody,
that's really the key,
bro. If anybody who's listening is a brown person, your brown parent or whatever, going to therapy is like them finding God.
I agree.
So it was just
I completely agree.
That whole experience kind of shaped why we have a relationship. Because at one point I was totally coming to terms and content with the idea of just not having a relationship. But
same with me and my father as well.
And then the last 2 years have developed such extremely fast levels of intimacy and bonding as a mother and daughter that it's like, I'm very grateful for it because it created this relationship that I never thought I could have. And that was the parent that I needed when I was younger. And it was a hard thing for me to come to terms with, this like sense of resentment and the guilt towards like my inner child not having been able to receive what I'm receiving as an adult.
Yeah.
But it almost comes full circle with like this extremely well-developed, well-rounded mindset now. It's like
yes, I agree. It's like, because you learn to give yourself that.
Yeah. And then you also get to heal certain like things once you're allowing yourself to accept it, by the way, because that was a whole process, is learning to accept that. But once you're able to allow yourself to accept that kind of like familial love, that like mother or father love that sort of like was so unobtainable at a time, it breaks down so many aspects of trauma that apply to so many different things, because your family are huge representations of your relationship building skills with yourself and with other people.
I completely agree. And I think for a lot of us who have had estrangements with like family members, that becomes such a part of our identity that we're almost not willing to let it go.
And then trauma bonding, right?
Yes.
Once we're here talking about trauma bonding, it creates almost another sense of like this otherism, this like identity of like, we're just from families that didn't have that like warm, soft parenting that you almost like kind of didn't want to be friends with those kids. Like personally for me, that's how I took it.
I agree. I definitely, as a sort of coping mechanism, like learned to look down on that, because I thought it was something I could never have for myself. So I convinced myself I didn't need it.
Right.
And then once I did have the opportunity to start healing relationships with my parents, my dad definitely the most actively, it was something that, you know, I couldn't bring myself to fully commit to, because I couldn't let go of my pride of, you know, who I was, and also the grudge of what he did to me, you know, of what I felt was done to me. And it requires being a bigger person to be like, that is not a part of me, and I can let it go.
It's like,
because you don't have to be that anymore. Right. Then you don't have to be that broken child from a broken home who doesn't like have like mommy or daddy's love anymore. Essentially, you can let that go.
Right. I think it's really interesting when you're able to kind of like come to peace with it yourself and let that idea go. It almost feels like you're being a parent to them. Like that's how
and to yourself, for sure.
Yeah. There's like, it's almost like this other, it's so hard to describe that feeling, because when I kind of like relinquish this idea that like this father figure that I wanted in my life is just never going to happen. And then when it came to a terms of like, this is an old man who can barely operate anymore. Like, I just need to let that go, because he's never going to be the bigger person to come to me and apologize for what he's done to me. Versus like, I know a lot of my sisters have a hard time healing their relationship with our dad. And it's like, I have found so much peace though with just relinquishing that, like just like surrendering into the fact that I can never have what I have built with my mom, with my dad, you know. But I will say, another tangent, we're going off topic. Let's wrap this up, because I could just sit and talk to you forever, but I would love to do that too.
I could go on, but you're really just bringing it out of me.
Oh my God, I'm just like really bringing it out of you. But so on the show, we also have this little segment where it's called Hot Take. So you have the opportunity now to kind of like we did talk a lot about controversy and a lot of controversial things, but like, do you have, through all of your experience, exposure, and everything, a hot take that can be controversial, be direct, and just be upfront, honest, and real, that you want to just like air off, that you're like, finally, so I have this platform. Let's go.
Yes. If you have enjoyed any labor rights, if you have enjoyed any organizing rights, if you have enjoyed any community advocacy rights, if you have benefited from any of that, you should thank, acknowledge, and respect publicly and loudly sex workers. That's my hot take, is don't forget about the sex workers. And here's why. I love how you're just like, wait, you're like, go on.
My thing is like, I was mostly pointing that towards the coffee industry, and you went completely left field
Yes.
So I was like, interesting.
There was a point in time in which I wanted to talk about sex workers on the U.S. Barista Champ stage. This is
Really?
why. Yeah, because so many of us in this world have had to resort to sex work to survive at some point.
Yeah.
And a lot of people who are in the service industry that applies to. And sex workers also, like, we're here amongst your communities. Like, I have a sex work background, and I'm not ashamed, you know, and it's part of one of the reasons why I am so familiar with community organizing and advocacy, because no one keeps their community safe no one keeps their community safe like such a highly policed community such as sex workers, where the only rights that we have and the only like protections that we have and the only sort of validation, like, you know, strippers having unions and, you know, like the Red Umbrella organization and things of that nature, are because we did that for ourselves. And because, you know, such a highly policed, highly ostracized, highly sort of hidden community has done so much that has helped the labor movement, has helped mutual aid, has set examples for how to really create like community advocacy, that I just find it so fucked up that people, you know, erase us to such a high degree. I have met so many baristas who have done sex work, dabbled in sex work, who, you know, like almost everyone knows and or loves a sex worker. Like, there's just so much stigma and so much invisibility.
Yeah.
And I feel like for the sort of workers focused labor movement, you know, like frontline worker ideology that the coffee industry loves to tout, like, give some love and respect to sex workers.
Fuck, that's a good one. Was very ignorant. I just learned something today.
Yeah, you should definitely look into like sex worker advocacy and organization, because some of the only laws that are like out there to protect sex workers are created because of lobbying by like sex workers.
Damn, that was a good one. Fuck.
I'm glad. I think that I thought that I would maybe be the only person to be like, hey, but sex workers, like, on the podcast. So had to definitely shout out my roots.
You have, in this whole amount of time, taken me on many different ideas of your life story. Like, that's fucking crazy. You are such an interesting person.
If we had all the time in the world, I would have so much more to even share with you.
Okay, so the next time, if you're going to stop through fucking Columbus, you know this bitch lives here now.
Let's meet up and get a coffee.
I don't know if these are coffee stories. These seem like more like, let's chill and get a drink, but you said you were sober, so coffee makes sense.
Yes, I am sober. I was like, I didn't say that. But I love hanging out in a bar and getting a Shirley Temple. That's one of my fave sober activities. I love me a Shirley Temple. I do smoke weed, though, so if you ever want to share a
That's
joint,
like the one thing that I don't do. I'm like an old lady.
Okay. That's okay. It's not for everybody.
It gives me panic attacks.
I have so much generational Jewish. Another thing that I also have said to my nail tech today, but I have so much inherited neurotic Jewish anxiety that I need to smoke weed, or else I would be unbearable. My mom is like a much more unfiltered version of it, and it's funny because my partners are like, oh, you're just like your mom, but just a little more spunky and a little more easygoing and a little more stoned. So without the weed, I would be, God only knows how high strung.
Well, fuck. Yeah. God damn it. I hate that you live so far away.
That's okay, I'm sure that coffee will take me to the Midwest sooner rather than later.
And hopefully you don't stay for too long.
Well, I really like Michigan. I have a really good friend who lives in Grand Rapids.
Yeah.
And I've been out to visit them a few times over the years, and I just think it's so beautiful. And there's good coffee in Michigan too. There's like some really good coffee in Michigan. But I just think that a lot of the middle of the country is so beautiful that like white people can't just have it. You know what I mean? So like, I'll be out there.
my God. At some point, I need to make a trip out to the East Coast again.
Please do. We'll show you a great time.
I have been told that too many times.
Yeah, it would be memorable for sure.
Y'all ain't ready for me out there. I'll tell you what, though. Talk about loud. Me and Maxie are on the same energy.
Ready. I love that. I'm a little more like, I'm very content to let Maxie just be the show, like take it over. Like, yeah. I'm happy to be here and witness, you know what I mean? And then like ad lib, like give a little ad lib where, you know, like wherever it best fits. But
I love that so much.
Yeah, like I'm just like some little, you know, backup singer. But I'm happy to witness that sort of chaos. I thrive in it, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's because it could possibly enable you into also being like that too.
Absolutely, it can, yeah.
Well, we've been chatting for a really long time, and I have loved every fucking minute of it. You are such a lovable person, and I love your energy. I love all the things we talked about. I really do want to hang out with you one day. Like all of the people I fucking have met on the East Coast, I just want to sit and be like, let's all just like chill and get some food. Like it would be such a good time.
I'm calling now that this will come to fruition. I
really hope so. But I will bid you adieu. I know that we've been chatting for a while and it's 8:00 now on EST time, so.
Sure is.
Don't be a stranger. You can always hit me up.
Yes, I will be. I also enjoy this conversation a lot. I wasn't like sure what to like expect. We didn't know anything about each other really. So
this has been the go with the flow show for the last couple episodes.
It's been nice. No, it's definitely been good.
Alrighty. Yes. Well, you have a great night.
You too.
I will probably reach out to you soon just to chit chat.
Yeah, let's shoot the shit. Yeah, and if you ever need anyone to talk to, I know just shit is unruly now. I'm always here. My inbox is always open. And I'm
same.
All right.
Okay. Well, I'll talk to you soon. You have a good night.
You too. Ciao. Bye.
This episode just takes you on so many different wavelengths where we talk about politics, we talk about identity, we talk about being children of immigrants living in America, and then also about being a barista and just trying to grow in that industry and fighting against these uncomfortable, like, uneasy, like, working situations, and then trying to find your voice and making more of a voice for a community that I did not even know existed. Like, I didn't know much about. I mean, it checks out why it's an invisible part of the industry. It's because who's going to march around half the time and say I'm a sex worker? So it's just, like, amazing that they came on the show and they were so fucking vulnerable and very open about their emotional space and what they're feeling and what they've experienced. And it makes me very happy to hear that there are people like them that are creating spaces for other people to feel comfortable in emotional spaces and comfortable with coming forward and saying this stuff, because obviously they need to build their community in the way they need to.